At the beginning of the movie, two robbers storm a bank, aggressively ordering everyone to the ground. Suddenly, police cars arrive, disrupting their plans. One of the robbers confronts a woman, threatening her with a gun and demanding to know who called the police. He begins counting down to shoot her. However, the bank officer steps forward and admits that he made the call. Tragically, the robber shoots and kills the bank officer before they all escape from the bank. The story then shifts to a futuristic resort called Vice. This resort provides visitors the ability to indulge in any fantasy they desire, no matter how violent or unethical. No laws, no rules, and no consequences. The only limit is imagination. Then we met Detective Roy making a call with operators to get information, but unluckily, even though this is his 5th round, he couldn't find an appropriate feedback. He angrily kicked the car screen. Suddenly, he got the information and went into the building. On the other side, Kelly was asleep when her friend Melissa woke her up for a special day. Melissa, who works as a bartender at the resort, believed it was her last day on the job. Kelly shared a strange dream she had and even sketched a church building she saw. They raised their glasses to new beginnings. Later, in the office, they met Julian, who checked their work and provided updates for the night program. At night, Kelly and Melissa were excited about the next day, which they saw as a fresh start. Despite a man showing interest in them, they ignored him and continued on their way. At the party, everyone was dancing, drinking, and having fun. Detective Roy was also present. He moved through the party corridor, searching for a man. Earlier, he had received information. Suddenly, he heard a woman crying from a nearby room. Roy broke down the door and confronted the man who was beating and attempting to rape the woman. The man resisted, believing that in this environment, not everything was a crime. However, skillfully, Detective Mitch managed to subdue him and rescue the woman. Kelly and Melissa began enjoying their time, even though Kelly was working. In the meantime, Kelly served her client Evan and struck up a conversation. Her encounter with Evan, a kind-hearted visitor, ignited a spark within her, inspiring her to pursue her aspirations and follow her dreams. Kelly complimented Evan's shirt and invited him to join their celebration, as it was her last day in this environment. However, Evan politely declined. Later, after work, they unexpectedly encountered the first man. Melissa confronted him harshly, but he suddenly pulled out a gun, shooting and killing her. He also choked Kelly, ending her life. Back in the office, Julian instructed them to clean up the environment after monitoring the situation via cameras. It's revealed that Kelly and her companion Melissa are gynoids, genetically cloned human-like artificial beings. They receive treatment and wear bracelets that erase their memories, allowing them to experience each day anew. This cycle repeats for them and their new clients. The next morning, Kelly is asleep again, and Melissa wakes her up, both believing it's their last day at work. In the office, Detective Roy receives a warning from his boss regarding his actions from the previous night. Julian, their top taxpayer, is involved, and the country's significant expenses rely on him. Despite this, Detective Roy stands firm and refuses to engage in further discussion. Later at the bar, Kelly and her friend enjoy themselves, unaware that they are caught in a loop. Suddenly, Kelly experiences flashbacks from the previous night, memories of being choked and witnessing the merciless murder of her friend. Disturbed, she retreats to a corner. Operators monitor Kelly's unusual behavior. Immediately, they took her back to the laboratory office. Along the way, she experienced vivid flashbacks from her past. Once there, they secured her in a capping chair. The engineer placed a memory flushing device on her head, warning her that the process might be challenging. He instructed her to close her eyes. Initially, Kelly assumed he was a doctor, but she soon realized he was an engineer. He explained that he would erase her memories and initiate the machine, replaying her past experiences. Terrified, Kelly trembled as the memories flooded back. Suddenly, she broke free from the chain-capped bracelet and attacked him. Despite his efforts to restrain her, she managed to kick him away and fled. Security personnel pursued her, attempting to stop her escape. After enduring significant suffering and narrowly avoiding gunshots, she managed to escape from her captors. In the aftermath of her escape, the city police arrived to investigate and engage in a conversation with Julian. Inside, Julian was conferring with his assistant about the challenging task of locating and retrieving Kelly. The difficulty lies in the fact that Kelly appears to be more human than not. Meanwhile, Detective Roy approached Julian, who falsely claimed that Kelly's disappearance was a random occurrence caused by unidentified individuals. Roy expressed expressed curiosity, emphasizing that any incident could have broader implications for their country. Upon returning to the city, Kelly enters the bar and stumbles upon news related to Vice Resort. A man who had been present there attempts to engage her in conversation, but she abruptly disappears from his sight. Fearfully, she steps outside, only to realize that he is following her. The man brandishes a knife, intensifying her panic. Unexpectedly, Julian's associates locate her and shower her with compliments, attempting to persuade her. However, without warning, they shoot the man pursuing Kelly, prompting her to flee from them. After an intense chase, she finds herself cornered in a building. The pursuers catch up to her. In a desperate attempt to persuade her, one of them speaks gently, but fear grips her and she holds her breath. As they count down, a gunshot rings out. Seizing the moment, she sprints, leaps from the building, and lands on a nearby car. Despite the pain, she keeps running. They report her escape, and now they're tracking her movements on the roads. Subsequently, the police discovered the body of the man who had been killed with his own knife. Detective Roy was present during the investigation, and officers informed him that they had received information from a local bartender. According to this intel, the deceased man had been following a woman with blonde hair, none other than Kelly. Kelly, driven by her memories and dreams, arrives near the church she had seen in her recurring visions. In her haste, she calls out for someone, and to her surprise, Evan materializes. The familiarity hits her. He's an old friend. Evan proceeds to break the bracelet on her hand, revealing that it's connected to how they've been tracking her. In the inner sanctuary room, he revealed a picture of a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Kelly. When she inquired, he explained that this woman had been his wife, but she had succumbed to cancer. Remarkably, he had designed Kelly's appearance to mirror his late wife's. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Detective Roy diligently investigates. He reviews camera recordings with his assistant officer, only to discover that the system had been hacked or disabled temporarily. Just then, his director confronts him about visiting Julian's building, despite prior warnings. Roy defends their peaceful conversation, but the director insists he be cautious. Otherwise, he risks losing his police credentials. Another officer conducted DNA analysis and hurried to inform Detective Roy. The results revealed that the DNA belonged to the woman who had passed away 5 years ago due to cancer. Meanwhile, inside the church, Evan handed her a glass of water. As they conversed, he shared the origins of his AI firm and how it all began. However, everything shifted when Julian entered the picture. Evan confided in her, swearing that he was aware of Julian's recent plans. He assured her that she could embrace her humanity to the fullest extent and even transcend it. In the Vice office, Julian discovered that Kelly's cognitive abilities exceeded their initial estimates. He was shocked when he saw the sketch she had drawn after a dream. The sketch led them to a mysterious church. Suddenly, Julian remembered that this was the same church where Evan and his wife had once lived. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Julian urgently ordered them to investigate further. Inside the church, Evan briefed Kelly on crucial details while simultaneously packing his belongings. As Kelly looked at his shirt, memories flooded back to her, a series of flashbacks. Evan reassured her that they were about to leave this place and head to a Caribbean location where they wouldn't be tracked by GPS. Detective Roy suddenly appeared on the scene. He started calling out, hesitating at first. Evan then came forward, holding his gun behind his back. Roy asked Evan if he knew someone named Evan, or if he had seen a girl with blonde hair. Evan replied that he didn't know anything and that it was just a church. Immediately, Detective Roy asked Evan to come closer. Suddenly, Evan and Roy exchanged gunfire, and Evan was injured, falling to the ground. Kelly then appeared from behind and attacked Detective Roy. Kelly and Evan then started to flee the scene. However, Julian's people also arrived at the location. After a lot of intense fighting and gunshots, both Kelly and the injured Evan were able to get into a car and escape. After some time, Julian learned that his men had been killed and that Kelly had escaped. He knew that Detective Roy had been there before they arrived. Julian then decided to use microwave emissions to try and track Kelly. His assistant reminded him that this would also draw attention to their own activities and involve more civilians, but Julian was determined, so they went ahead with the plan. Meanwhile, Evan and Kelly had left the car and started walking to Evan's friend's place. Back at the church, Detective Roy was working with his assistant to gather information about Evan. They discovered that Evan was a biomechanical engineer who had previously worked with military defense using AI and had also worked with Julian. The detective also found a picture of Kelly and got a clue about where Evan planned to go next. Evan and Kelly arrived at Evan's friend's house and met James. James welcomed them, but was recently informed that Kelly is an artificial being. Surprised and overwhelmed, he stared at her for a while. Evan and Kelly convinced James to help them, and he promised this would be the last time. James helped them by changing Kelly's ID number in the system, giving her a new identity. Evan also told James that they were being tracked, so James changed Evan's identity as well. One more time, they asked Kelly if she wanted to update her skills, but she refused. James then provided them with a vehicle to help them escape. Back at the Vice office, they were tracking Detective Roy's movements. At the same time, Roy informed them that all the data about Evan and Kelly had gone missing, so they could no longer track them. Roy told his assistant to continue watching the image he had previously sent and to follow him to St. Helena Island, which was the location he had obtained information about earlier at the church. Roy also informed his assistant that Julian's people were following him. Roy told his assistant not to tell anyone about the location, and then he proceeded to head there. In the meantime, Evan and Kelly were waiting for a cargo shipment and talking about their life and future plans. Kelly offered for Evan to go with her, but he refused. Suddenly, Detective Roy appeared and interrupted their conversation. Evan begged Roy not to shoot, but immediately, Julian's men arrived and opened fire, creating a tense situation. After a prolonged exchange of gunfire, Evan was shot and Kelly was unable to save him. Finally, Detective Roy came to believe in Kelly, and they both went to James's home to request an identity change and some skill upgrades for Kelly. They lied to James to get his help. Eventually, they arrived at the Vice headquarters. After a lot of fighting, Kelly got close enough to Julian to point a gun at him, but miraculously, she couldn't bring herself to shoot him. As a result, Julian beat her. They strapped Kelly to a chair, but just in time, Detective Roy arrived and forced the operator to upload the system that Roy had brought. This caused every gynoid in Vice to suddenly remember everything. As a result, Julian was unable to reboot Kelly because of the system change. At the Vice resort, chaos erupted, and police officers were alerted by emergency news. Meanwhile, back in the building, Detective Roy closed in on the room where Kelly was restrained. Unexpectedly, he pointed his gun at Julian and began untying her. But Julian swiftly retaliated, opening fire and hitting Roy's hand. Kelly intervened skillfully, providing Roy with an opportunity to shoot Julian. Finally, everyone was free. Kelly reunited with her friend, and as the movie concluded, Roy welcomed them to a new world. Julian's eyes fluttered open. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Watch our next videos on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you on the next one.